Welcome to June, where somehow these two maniacs on the beat are still talking about spring football. That is Berm over there. I am Austin. This is the Austin and Berm Show on the beat. And I promise we're almost done. But what we do here is talk about Ohio State and its football team and its roster and its position groups all year long. So we're probably not ever going to actually stop.
No, and we're going to talk about this linebacker group again probably in like August because that's what we do, because this is the preview review and August will be the review preview. But either way,
I don't think you have to call them both.
No. It's two different names. This is the review preview and August will be the preview review. So,
got it.
It's, we're looking back to look ahead, and in August we'll look ahead to look back.
Smart.
Yeah. So it works out. We're on YouTube now. Welcome to the two of you. Those of you who have watched us on the beat here over the last 3.5 weeks on 10 TV Plus, we really appreciate that. We hope you're still doing that if that's where you find your podcast and your video. But if you're more of a traditionalist and you just like the YouTube, well, here we are. We're going to have everything that we've always had, that Austin and I have always done. It'll all be housed here on the 97.1 The Fan YouTube channel. So stay tuned to that. All right. Look forward to that. Subscribe, notify, do all the things that you're supposed to do on YouTube, because now we're here. So while we're here, Austin, let's talk linebackers, because it's actually turned into like a really damn good group of players for Ohio State. And it's a position group that if we look back 3 years from now or 3 years ago, it looks completely different than it did back then. And not just because the players have changed, but the style of players have changed. And that's not a pun on Sonny's name.
Yeah, no, it has changed really dramatically. And I think as much as we talk about, Brian Hartline's influence and impact in wide receivers and building that into the best position group in the country, how Tim Walton has re-energized and revitalized BIA at corner, what James Laurinaitis has done, where the linebackers were sort of wandering through a desert of accolades, and they were not on even the all Big Ten team for close to a decade. They were still really good defenders, and you look at, here and there, pick some examples of Pete Warner, for example, what Baron Browning could do, guys who then would go on to have NFL success, but it wasn't translating to even the best version of Ohio State's defenses for a long time. And now, boy, they have, it's just going into James Laurinaitis' third year back at Ohio State, second year as a full-time assistant coach here. But the recruiting impact, the style of play that you mentioned, again, not a pun on Sonny, the versatility that, James Laurinaitis is unlocking with some of these players. The depth chart is not it's not, there's 15 names. There's not that many of them on here. You're talking about, 4 or 5 guys that could reasonably contribute, but then that next wave, you can already see it, lining up. The success that James had there with TJ Alford and Riley Pettijohn and Eli Lee, pretty good group there. But you have Garrett Stover pushing up there. You have Peyton Pierce, who I think had one of the most notable springs of anybody on the defensive side. I think I've said that for somebody at every position, but he's that guy for the linebackers. And then even when you lose Cody Simon, you have another Blocko waiting in Sonny Styles, and then you have Arvell Reese, who I don't even know what you do with him. Whatever you want, I guess. You can't pin him down to one spot. So I would be stunned if there are not more accolades and better accolades coming for this group. Been a number of these rewinds where it has felt like hyperbole, but that's, I think, how stunning the turnaround has been in the last couple of years at linebacker, based on where they were. Not just James Laurinaitis, but before Jim Knowles arrived, he deserves some credit for this as well. He was working with the linebackers, and I think some of the scheme changes helped there as well. But I think James, with his reputation, with his knowledge of the position, the way he has embraced that coaching lifestyle, which you think back 4 or 5 years ago, that was the biggest question. Is he going to want to do this? Yeah, he wants to do it.
Yeah, and I don't want to I'm not intending to dismiss Jim Knowles' contributions, what he did to the Ohio State defense as a whole. I'm not intending to just blow smoke up James Laurinaitis' butt because he's the current linebacker coach and a former 97.1 The Fan employee. James is he is so good at his job. And, he came to Ohio State in the 2023 season. His first year with Ohio State, the Buckeyes had the Big Ten linebacker of the year in Tommy Eichenberg. That had never happened for Ohio State since the Big Ten started handing out those awards. And, when you look back at what Ohio State was at linebacker in the last decade, there's Raekwon McMillans, there's Darren Lees, there's Jerome Bakers. There's been some big time guys who went on to have long NFL careers. But what James has done is completely changed the way that the group operates. And, you talk about Cody Simon and the Block O, Sonny Styles, who we assume will be the Block O this year. Like, to me, like, the Block O at Ohio State should always be a linebacker. Like that is Ohio State's funny because over the last 50 years, we've seen the program change its identity so many times. Urban Meyer, talked about the Cadillac position at running back. Now it's wide receiver U again, Ryan Day, and what he's done with the quarterback position and the first round picks there. But to me, the heart of Ohio State football is always the linebacker room. It's always been the linebacker room, whether you go back to Marcus Merrick or Tom Cousineau or Chris Spielman or Andy Katzenmoyer or James Laurinaitis himself. The defense runs through the linebackers, and the last few years were fun. It's fine. Okay. The safety driven defense, it's a fun anecdote. We talk about it a lot, but for Ohio State's true potential to be met on the field, it has to be the linebackers that lead the way. And you have to have guys that you can count on down in, down out. And that's what they have right now. And that's going to be a consistent theme over these next dozen years or so, however long James Laurinaitis is in Columbus, because like he loves this stuff, like loves it. And it is different. It's funny because we talk and have talked over the years about Brian Hartline and how elite he is as a recruiter because he doesn't want to be viewed as a recruiter. He's not a salesman. James Laurinaitis, if you remember, aside from the fact that we had an opportunity to have media opportunities with a grad assistant when he was the grad assistant in 23, which is in itself an anomaly because Ohio State doesn't normally do that. Mm-hmm. But if you recall, the first time we got to sit down and talk to James inside of the Woody around the entire media group and listening to him talk about the way he talks to recruits, which is like, I lived this life. I did every single thing you want to do. I was a underrated 3-star from Minnesota who came to Ohio State and had no idea if he was going to be somebody and left Ohio State as one of 8 3-time All-Americans in school history, a 3-time leading tackler. He's now, I can't believe he's not inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame yet. He's, I think, a 6-time inductee or a nominee, but hasn't not gotten the votes yet, but that'll certainly happen soon. And at the risk of really looking down the road here, it is my personal belief that James Laurinaitis will be Ohio State's next head football coach. Now, whenever that happens, I don't know, but that is my belief. I think that he will be the next Ohio State head football coach because I think as a coach, as a leader of men, he is exactly the right guy to do that. And that's not a knock on anyone else. I just think that the way things will work out timeline wise and opportunity wise, I just think that it sets up perfectly for James to be that guy if he wants it. And when you talk to him, when you see the way he deals with his job now, it is hard to imagine he doesn't want that.
Yeah, that's a long-term bold P right there to get things rolling. Yeah, it is. It's too bad, I think, in some ways. Safety-driven defense was so fun for so long just to say and make jokes about, but it is an LB-led defense now for Ohio State, and there's no question who the leader of that unit is. And I think really we've both said it already. The leader of the entire team, the heart and soul, the embodiment of what it is to be an Ohio State Buckeye is Sonny Styles. There's just no way that anyone else can wear the Block O. I refuse to believe it.
That's a fun offseason game we should come up with. Like, if we exclude Sonny Styles, who has the best case to be the Ohio State Block O, but you can't exclude him from this conversation because, as you said, he's the heart and soul of this team now.
And when you look at that 6, it's going to be pretty easy. You just move that arm up real quick, and you got the Block O right there. They don't even have to make.
That's how numbers work.
That is how numbers work. That's an easy adjustment to the jersey. I talked with both Sonny and Lorenzo a couple weeks ago as they were getting ready, to give back for their charity event, their charity initiative. And it's like, do you guys even take any time off? Like, yeah, we took a vacation for a couple days, but you have to still find time to work out. And then it felt really weird that we weren't in the Woody. So the first place that they went as soon as they got back was to go do some more workouts. And I was really impressed. I know a lot of, Ryan Day talked about this and a lot of other Buckeyes have with the moving down in the seats in the team room and taking that next step and that next leadership role. Sonny was the first person that described that to you and me in the conversation we had with him in the offseason. And I was struck. I've always been impressed with him, but it feels like Sonny has found a different gear. He's taken on a different responsibility. I think it has unlocked another side of his personality where super serious Sonny Styles was. I've always enjoyed talking with him. If you're paying attention, you're going to learn a lot from him. But there weren't a lot of smiles. There weren't a lot of jokes. I think he's enjoying himself in a way that he hasn't before. Now, that doesn't mean, as I said, when he gets back from vacation, that he doesn't want to go back to work or that he doesn't want to work while he's on vacation. But we've mentioned this a lot, how we appreciate the opportunity to get to know these guys when they're really kids, basically, then young men. Sonny is a grown-ass man in everything that James Laurinaitis and Ryan Day or Ohio State fans could possibly want. So he doesn't need me to campaign for him to win the Block O, and I don't think he needs a campaign. He's going to win those votes, I think, pretty easily. But watching him and what that's going to mean, I think there was a time where the assumption was just going to be, well, he's moving up his reclassification so that he can get to the NFL level even quicker. Like there must be some sort of like self-importance or cockiness with Sonny Styles, which it is easy to get that outside perception based on that track. But the way that he's worked since then is like, no, I'm going to be here. I'm going to see this through. And I want to have that legacy, 4-year legacy. I'm going to change positions. I'm going to do all these things that are good for the team, good for me, not leaving at any time. He could have with a national championship ring. He just said, I get it. I totally understand. You've done everything you can. He still feels like there's more to accomplish, which is remarkable.
Well, because for him, there is. I mean, he still only played linebacker for a year. And I think there's a lot of things about what you just said that I want to try to attack, and not attack, but to either edify or to just add to. I was the first person outside of his family that Sonny told he was reclassifying to the class of 2022. I went to his high school at Pickerington Central in November of 2021 to sit down and talk to him about his upcoming commitment. And when we got done, he said, by the way, I'm reclassifying. I'm going to be signing in 6 weeks. I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And it was never about getting to the NFL, as you said. Like, this was about how can my development be improved? How can I get better? And going into a senior year at Pickerington Central was just not going to help him. And the facts are that Sonny has not had a smooth road to this point. I mean, let's be honest. He played safety as a freshman, had some flash moments, but then looked pretty lost at times at the end of that first season. His second season, as Ohio State tried to figure out how to use him, his biggest highlight of the 2023 season was Blake Corum running away for him for a touchdown in the Big House. So then we watched him finally develop and get the opportunity to be the linebacker that we all thought he was going to be, because his frame is remarkable. So like, he's so smart that he's never looked at this as a say, how can I help Sonny Styles? It's like, how can Sonny Styles get better? How can Sonny Styles improve? And the last point I want to make, he's talking about his personality and how he's starting to come. He was 16 years old when we all met him. Like, yeah. He's, he had no idea who he was as a human. And now, as a 4th-year guy at Ohio State, like, you see him. I'll tell you anecdotally, the first thing that comes to my mind about the changes in Sonny, it's not this sit down that we had with him where he talked about the chairs. It was the Student Appreciation Day at Ohio State at the end of March this spring, where in previous years, when the students would be in there and fans would be in there, Sonny would sort of slink away and would disappear. That was not the case this time. He was one of, I think him and Jeremiah Smith and Brandon Ennis were the last three guys out there talking to fans, taking pictures, doing autographs.
Well, Jeremiah wasn't, because he was escorted out of the facility by CJ Barnett and security.
Yeah, well, I mean, he had no choice. He was certainly, he was out there last because the line, him and Brandon. I mean, it's not a surprise. Like, if we take Jeremiah out of that equation, the only other guy that I think of, really, now that I'm playing the game in my head, who's like the leader-ish vibe that you want out of the Block O, is Brandon. And so Brandon and Sonny being the last two guys out there is not a surprise to me, but it does speak volumes about what he's become as a leader and what he wants to be, because he's still a 20-year-old kid who is now a year away from making his dreams come true. And he's done it in his backyard, the place where his father played. He plays alongside of his brother. He's a national champion. And everything that Sonny Styles wanted to get out of Ohio State and that Ohio State wanted to get out of Sonny Styles has happened, even though that timeline was accelerated and moved up a year when nobody at Ohio State really was asking for it. So it's so often we are seeing the negative effects of the player freedom era. Guy, especially like at quarterback, when the reclassifications happen, it never really works out. It has worked out for Sonny Styles, but it's not in the way that people assumed, as you said. Like, this was not about get to the NFL faster. It was, don't waste my time in high school where I can't possibly improve.
Right. Yeah. And look, if we're doing a spring recap, there wasn't a lot that Sonny Styles actually needed to do. But you could still see him out there trying to get as many snaps as possible. And that's because there is a little bit of, as you said, he has to continue to get better with another year of familiarity at linebacker. But there's going to be some changes with the way that James Laurinaitis uses that position and Matt Patricia's influence on the defense as a whole, where you're seeing a lot more creativity, or at least the seeds being planted for that, because Sonny Styles can play anywhere, and Arvell Reese, whatever you ask him to do, he can go do it. We saw glimpses of this a year ago. I think there were probably only maybe 5 times but I remember them distinctly, vividly, watching Arvell Reese line up maybe on the other side of a formation and then make a tackle on the other sideline and looking like he could have run 50 more yards and run somebody down in 3 seconds. He is as gifted of a linebacker as you're going to find. And I'm including Sonny Styles in that conversation. So the fact that you're putting them together, that should be terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, I think my first bold prediction of the spring of these reviews and previews and mailbags or whatever we've done in the last month is that Arvell Reese will be the second Buckeye drafted in this next year's NFL draft. And as all of the things that we've talked about Sonny Styles and all of the ways he's improved and grown and evolved into this different type of man, Arvell Reese as a pure linebacker, for a guy who also has only played it for a year, really, is like the evolution of the position heading into the end. Like Arvell Reese, there is not a single player. We've talked so much about CJ Hicks in this offseason and what the Matt Patricia addition might mean for him. I don't think there's going to be a single player benefited more from Matt Patricia's arrival than Arvell Reese. And I have heard from multiple people inside of the Woody over the last few months that if Caleb Downs was not on the Ohio State roster, that Arvell Reese would be viewed as the team's best defensive player. I continue to think that he's only getting better. And the thing about Arvell is when he was recruited out of Cleveland Glenville, he was just an edge rusher, an athlete. People didn't really know. Like, we've watched over his 2 years at Ohio State heading into year 3, Larry Johnson fight for more Arvell. I want Arvell. I'm like, who was it? Was it Austin Saraville talked about Arvell Reese and like how he's scary when he's on the edge. We're going to see Arvell Reese do things this year that we haven't seen an Ohio State linebacker do. And I think it actually may be to the detriment of Sonny Styles, who at times is probably going to have to be more of your traditional in the box, stand in the middle and control things type of linebacker, because Arvell Reese is the guy who's going to be able to freestyle and do some freaky things. And like, it's probably been, it was probably Darren Lee. I mean, Jerome Baker had his moments, I guess, but Darren Lee is the last time I can remember an Ohio State linebacker really changing a game and affecting what the offense does on a regular basis. And that is what Arvell Reese is going to do this season for Ohio State. And we probably should talk or should have talked more about Matt Patricia's influence in this room. And maybe it's hard to do because we don't know exactly how much he's changing yet, as we talked about on Friday's show.
Yeah.
But the Arvell Reese that we're going to see this year is going to shock people, and he's going to be a first team All Big Ten player, and he's going to be a first round draft pick next year. And it's going to be one of those recruitments that turn into like a, wow, Ohio State really nailed that one. And then Ted Ginn Sr. is going to get all the credit.
Well, I remember well that you wrote in the analysis of Arvell Reese's commitment that he reminded you and other people of Darren Lee, or at least people in the Woody. So I think you might have got that one right. It's possible that his impact there might exceed what Darren Lee did. We'll see what that looks like, because I think that was one of the most intriguing parts of spring for me at linebacker. Is you said, well, maybe Sonny, it's a detriment, at least to appreciating what he's doing, if he has to stay at home and play in the middle and do some of the things that Cody Simon did. I feel like that Matt Patricia is going to use them interchangeably. I don't know exactly what that looks like, and the X's and O's part is, I'll leave that to the experts to break down. We'll have Bobby and Zach do that for us and tell us about that. But like, you can't just have Sonny. You can't waste his athleticism either. And I think it's the ability for both of them to do whatever you ask for: size, strength, speed, IQ, that is going to make it so difficult for opponents to deal with it. If you could just roll them to one side or the other, and you don't have to identify, this guy's strong, this guy's weak, this guy's Mike, which again, I'm bringing up a third guy here because the opportunity to move around both Sonny and Arvell means that maybe Peyton Pierce is finding a bigger role, and we see more 3 linebacker packages than we have the last couple of years. I don't know. I think the opportunity is there. I think that's one of the most exciting parts of this for Matt Patricia and James Laurinaitis as they piece this together, is that, if defensive end or defensive line becomes more multiple, maybe Arvell Reese does contribute to that in the way that we thought that CJ Hicks might. I think it would be silly not to use him as a blitzer and a disruptor up front. And you can do that when you have confidence in a Peyton Pierce right there waiting, or a Garrett Stover once he gets fully healthy and the opportunity to get back out there in the way that he wants to. There is just finally this opportunity at linebacker that didn't necessarily exist, even when it was getting better, even when it was getting more productive. And you had Tommy and Steele, and then Cody Simon was pushing forward in that year off the bench. There still wasn't anything that you could really lean on beyond that to get, maybe you can play 3 guys. Maybe there'd be a 4th one. This is a group that can do that for sure.
Linebacker plays about trust, right? Like that. James Laurinaitis and Matt Patricia have to trust that the linebackers that are on the field are going to be in the right position and making plays, whether that's in a pass rush situation, whether that's in stuffing the run, whether that's in covering a tight end. And that's why I think, again, there's been a ton of talk about CJ Hicks, and it's been justifiable based on what we've seen and what we've seen out of Matt Patricia's history of using that position. But I think that there is a very real possibility that Arvell Reese becomes that guy this offseason and into the summer. And because Peyton Pierce is so trustworthy, that what you're saying is exactly right. You can actually have those 3 on the field together and use Arvell as an edge rusher in the way that we envision CJ Hicks being used, and not lose anything. Where I think with CJ, as we've seen over his 3-year career, the read and react part of the linebacker game does not come natural to him. And it does to Arvell, more so than anybody ever expected. To be honest, because when Arvell came to Ohio State, he was 6'4", 200 pounds and running a 4.5 and broad jumping 10 feet and doing all the things that freaky athletes do. But there were questions about his ability to pick up the defense and whether or not he's a guy that you could count on in all scenarios. And he's become that guy way faster than anybody anticipated. And now you have Peyton Pierce, who is your traditional old school, I'm a middle linebacker, and I'm going to put my face on people's faces, and I'm going to love it. And the things you can do with Sonny and Arvell now, like it's way different if Peyton Pierce is that guy. And then there's the next wave, right? So like Peyton Pierce, this is only year 2 for him. There's the next wave, because you have the same body types and the same physical attributes that you have with Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles. in Riley Pettijohn and TJ Alford. And you have the same mindset and mentality that you have with Peyton Pierce and Garrett Stover and Eli Lee. So like you're seeing James Laurinaitis' entire plan come to fruition and watching a position group go from average to elite in a very short amount of time because the coach of that room owns it in a way that Ohio State has not had a linebacker coach own it since Luke Fickell. And that is really the difference, because we went from Luke Fickell to Billy Davis to Jim Knowles-ish, because Jim Knowles was the linebacker coach, but not really. Now you actually see what happens when a linebacker coach, a position coach, not only is a full-time dedicated to that position spot, but a guy that really understands the position and understands what it means to be an Ohio State Buckeye. And I've never been the guy who thinks that every position coach or every coach needs to be a former player, because I've realized that that's not everyone's dream. But when you find the guys like Tim Walton, like Brian Hartline, like James Laurinaitis, boy, oh boy, it makes a big ass difference.
Yeah, it was, you know how traditionally I like to tap the brakes on the true freshman conversation. And I definitely, it's easier for me to do that right now on a room where Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese and Peyton Pierce are there to lead it. But man, this new version of me that's getting the Jeremiah Smith effect, when we saw TJ Alford and Riley Pettijohn walking through the Woody, what was that, in February, even before spring camp started, I was like, what? No,
yeah, not the same.
Those are not true freshmen before their first spring camp, before their first full summer. There's no way. So I don't expect them to play, but that's the part where Ohio State has so dramatically upgraded in terms of athleticism. It wasn't a developmental project. I love Pete Warner, I think, and I did more than almost anybody else watching or covering this team. But you couldn't have expected him to walk out as a true freshman and make the kind of impact. And I don't think that's even fair that I would say that Riley Pettijohn or TJ Alford could. But they don't look out of place on the Ohio State roster, which is the biggest part of that battle. So if they get a year to acclimate and they already have this little bit of physical head start, that's what we're talking about the way that the position has been revitalized. Because the starters were, even if they weren't winning all Big Ten awards, like Tommy Eichenberg contributed for a long time. For as much ridicule as Tough Borland got, you noticed when he wasn't on the field.
I mean, he's a three-time captain. That's not an accident.
Yeah, the productivity was there, and I don't think it was his fault. He didn't call that defense against Alabama. He didn't want to cover Devonta Smith, and he wasn't supposed to. But that's getting off track here. I think you just look at
you're seeing the physical side of it now beginning to equate to the mental side of it, and that is where things get different. That's why James Laurinaitis, if we go back to the class of 2025, right? If you go back to Peyton Pierce, Eli Lee, and TJ Alford and Riley Pettijohn, you have the best linebacker from Ohio. Does Ohio play good football? Do Ohio high school coaches know how to develop players?
That's correct.
Does Texas play good football? Does Texas linebacker?
They do.
Mm-hmm. Does Florida have freaky athletes who play high level football? They sure do.
I believe that's true. Yeah.
Did James Laurinaitis just host the number one ranked linebacker in the country from Georgia this past weekend? Does Georgia produce good football players? Like, there's a change in the philosophy. And part of that is just having a coach who has no fear to go in and try to win a recruiting battle in the heart of the South, or to go to Texas and take the number one linebacker in the country, like Riley Pettijohn, out of Texas and tell the Longhorns and Aggies on your way out, giving them the Stone Cold Steve Austin double birds. Okay. Like there's no fear in James Laurinaitis. This is not a guy who is giving undue respect to other coaches or other programs, because no one coaching linebackers in college football has done the things James Laurinaitis has done, period. Like, there is not another linebacker coach in the country who has a resume that James Laurinaitis has. And so the fact is, he's been hampered in the last 2 years by being a first-time coach. That's not going to be a problem for very long. And once he starts going, once he really starts to be able to say, oh, that's weird. My first year, I was a GA and we had the Big Ten linebacker of the year for the first time ever. My first year as a full-time assistant, a guy that nobody thought was a good enough player to play at Ohio State was a fourth-round draft pick in the NFL and is going to probably be a starter for the Arizona Cardinals, and Cody Simon. And now I have RL Reese and Sonny Styles, who will both be top 2-round or 3-round picks this coming year. One of them a first rounder, and RL Reese for sure. Count it, bank it. Once he gets going.
Well, Berm, I think they also won a national championship. I can't quite put my finger on that.
Did that happen? Yeah, I mean, so also that happened. Yeah. But it's fun, man. It's a fun time to be a linebacker playing for James Laurinaitis, and you're going to see more and more of them begging to do it like they do for Brian Hartline.
Well, that was fun to break down to start the month of June. As I said, we're just on this roller coaster. Berm's favorite thing to ride. Going to pick up speed. Full week of coverage coming your way. Camps starting. So the number of shows are about to pick up. It won't just be the beat, the things that you're accustomed to from before. It's about time to ramp some of that back up. If you're watching on YouTube, good to see you again here. If you're watching on 10 TV Plus, or The Fan, or listening on any of the audio platforms, you can get them on all of them. We appreciate you, and we're excited to be rolling again and getting closer. We got 6 weeks until Big Ten Media Days. After
that
camp
reminds
season
me,
is done.
I need to still buy my stuff.
Yeah, you should probably do that. And then
I'm going to drive to Vegas.
You are crazy, but that's what makes it fun. We're going to find out how Berm's going to travel to every game this year. That's going to be a different podcast. Maybe this week. I don't know. We'll figure it out as we go along on the Austin and Berm channel. Thanks so much for joining us on a Monday edition of The Beat. He's Berm. I'm Austin, and we will talk to you later.